John sat in the darkened room, surrounded by his fellow survivors. The group had been holed up in this abandoned house for weeks now, ever since the outbreak began. They had lost many along the way, but the remaining group was determined to survive. John's mind drifted back to the days before the outbreak. He had been a simple man, working a boring office job and living a mundane life. He never would have imagined that a zombie apocalypse would break out and turn his world upside down. But here he was, fighting for his life every day alongside his new family of survivors. They had all come from different walks of life, but now they were bound together by the need to survive. John looked around at his companions. There was Sarah, a former nurse who had become the group's medic. She was always calm and collected, no matter how dire the situation. Then there was Mike, a former police officer who had taken on the role of leader. He was tough and no-nonsense, but he always had the group's best interests at heart. Next to Mike sat Lily, a young girl who had lost her family in the early days of the outbreak. She had quickly become like a little sister to John, and he would do anything to protect her. Then there was Jack, a former mechanic who had a knack for fixing things, even in this post-apocalyptic world. And finally, there was Tom, a quiet man who rarely spoke, but was deadly with a gun. He had saved John's life on more than one occasion, and John was grateful to have him as part of the group. The group had been through a lot together. They had scrounged for food and supplies, fought off hordes of zombies, and even dealt with the occasional dangerous survivor. But through it all, they had stuck together, and had each other's backs. John's thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash outside. The group sprang into action, grabbing their weapons and taking up defensive positions. They had learned to be constantly on guard, as the zombies seemed to never rest. Mike peeked out the window and cursed. "It's a horde," he said, his voice tense. The group quickly gathered their belongings and prepared to make a run for it. They had been planning to move to a safer location, but it seemed the zombies had other plans. As they made their way through the house, they could hear the zombies outside, their moans and groans getting louder. John's heart was pounding in his chest as they reached the back door and stepped outside. The group moved quickly and silently, trying to avoid being noticed by the zombies. But they were spotted, and the horde began to converge on them. "Run!" Mike yelled, and the group took off. They ran through the streets, their hearts racing as they dodged and weaved through the zombies. John could hear the sound of their footsteps behind him, the moans of the zombies getting closer and closer. Just when John thought they were going to be overrun, they reached the safety of a nearby warehouse. Mike quickly barricaded the door behind them, and they all let out a sigh of relief. "We made it," Lily said, her voice shaking. John looked around at his fellow survivors, all of them panting and covered in sweat. They had survived another close call, and it only made their bond stronger. "We'll rest here for the night," Mike said, "then we'll make our way to the safe zone tomorrow." The group settled in for the night, taking turns keeping watch while the others slept. They were all exhausted, but they knew they couldn't let their guard down. As John sat by the window, keeping watch, he couldn't help but feel grateful for this group of survivors. They had become his family, and he knew that he wouldn't have made it this far without them. He looked out at the darkened streets, filled with the walking dead, and knew that they were all in this together. They would continue to fight and survive, no matter what challenges came their way. Because that's what families do, they stick together and never give up. And as the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the city, John felt a sense of hope. Because no matter how bleak the world may seem, as long as they had each other, they had a chance. Yay, the end. Oh right, yeah, I have to do this stuff now. Like, comment and subscribe. And please watch my other videos and comment ideas on stories.